Congrats, you're interested in buying a home. I love that. Home ownership is one of the best things you can do for yourself. And I'm about to explain all the steps in buying a home. You ready? Let's go. My name is Chris Martin, real estate agent, investor, coach. If you have not already, do me a favor and subscribe to this channel. Check out some of the other videos, in particular, the videos to this series on buying a home. I'm hoping that I can be helpful in your journey. All right, here we are. Step number 5 on buying a home. We got past the purchase and sales. Now it's appraisal time. So what happens with the appraisal? Well, this is something that the buyer actually pays for. So they pay their lender an appraisal fee, and the lender basically pushes a button and a random appraiser gets assigned to the deal to appraise the property. Now remember, if you're buying a property, you don't own, in most cases, you don't own the majority of the house. The bank owns the majority of the house, right? So if you look at it, the bank owns more of the property than you. So they want to make sure that they're actually lending on a property that is valued on what you're purchasing it for. So if a house is $500,000, they don't want to lend you $500,000, let's just say minus down payment and all that. They don't want to lend you $500,000 if the property's only worth $300. So they have to send out an independent appraiser to justify the value of that property. So that's what the appraisal is for, and you have to pay for that as a buyer. It's part of the closing cost. So you pay for an appraiser. How much does that cost? $500, $1,000, $1,500, somewhere around there. And you pay for that usually by credit card. Your lender will tell you how to pay for it. But the appraiser gets sent out to the property. They are going to justify the value of that property. They want to make sure that you're not overpaying for the property. But are they really looking out for you? No, they ain't looking out for you. They're looking out for the bank. They don't care if you overpay for the property. They want to make sure the bank doesn't overpay for the property. That's who they're really making sure that doesn't overpay for the property. So the bank wants to do that. So they don't really care about you, but you're a casualty of war, so I guess they care about you. But anyway, so they send out an appraiser, and an appraisal comes back. A lot of the times, 9 times out of 10, the appraiser looks at what the property is under agreement for. They can see that. They get a copy of the purchase and sales, and they see that it's under agreement for $500,000, and guess what? The appraisal magically comes back at $500,000, and that's what it appraises for 9 times out of 10. It's getting appraised for the purchase price. I always thought they were cheating when they saw the answer to that. I'd rather have it appraisers don't see anything. They go out there to tell you the value and have that be that, but that's not how it works. They basically cheat on the test. They see the answer, and as long as it's not way off, they give you the price. Now, let's say that property's under agreement for $500,000 and they really can't justify it. The closest thing they could come to is $450,000, $465,000, and they appraise it for $465,000. What happens then? Well, the buyer doesn't have to buy the property at $465,000. I mean, they can, and they would love to. The seller doesn't have to sell at $465,000 because they didn't agree to that. So both parties can walk away from the deal. What typically happens is there's some sort of negotiation. The seller can come down to the $465,000 and they can say, all right, it didn't appraise, we'll adjust our price, and now we'll give you an additional $35,000 off and sell it to you at $465,000 because that's all what the bank will loan you. So they can do that. Or if the buyer actually has some capital aside from their down payment, aside from their closing costs, they can put up the difference. So maybe the bank's only going to lend you $465,000. It doesn't mean you can't still purchase the property for $500,000, but you're going to have to come up with that extra $35,000 out of your pocket, in addition to your down payment, in addition to your closing costs. So a lot of buyers can't do that, right? They already have to put a down payment down and all that stuff. So again, what typically happens is there's some movement on both sides. Maybe the buyer comes to the table with an extra couple thousand, maybe the seller comes down a good chunk, or maybe the seller comes down a whole lot. What you're seeing in today's market a lot of times, because it's so competitive, buyers are agreeing up front to pay over the appraised value. I'm seeing some of my buyers, they like the property so much, they're willing to pay $5,000, $10,000 over the appraised value, not to exceed the purchase price. So that gives some level of protection to the sellers to basically say, hey, Mr. Seller, accept our offer, because if the appraisal doesn't come in at $500, if it comes in at $465,000, we'll pay you $5,000, $10,000 over what they appraise the property for, as long as it doesn't exceed $500. So that's the language that I would advise my clients to put in if that's what they're interested in doing. Some buyers come to the table and they're like, look, Chris, do whatever we have to do to get this property. Well, if that's the case, we go over some options and there's some different things that we can add in, but we want to make sure that that is doable for the buyer. So if you're interested in kind of putting some additional things in your offer that are going to be enticing to the seller, talk to your agent about them. Or if you're using me as an agent, talk to me about them. If you give me the green light and you tell me, Chris, what do we have to do to get this property? I'm gonna let you know everything we have to do to get this property. So the appraisal is a big deal because we want the property to appraise, and that's a term of the financing contingency. So it's a term of the financing contingency to where the property has to appraise, and if it does appraise, everything's good, you move forward. The seller does not get a copy of the appraisal. The buyer gets a copy of the appraisal because remember, the buyer, you paid for the appraisal, so you get a copy of it. And that can give you some good peace of mind knowing that you're buying a home that's appraised and worth the price you're paying for it. So hopefully that helped you guys. Don't forget, we have 7 videos total in this buyer series on how to buy a house step by step. Make sure you're watching them all. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.